There's too many CSMs right now. And I think their job is too big. Commercial efficiency, the yield on dollars spent in sales and marketing has gone down 50+%.
When you guys came out with Challenger, I remember all the old dudes were flipping out.
We wrote it and we had to put on flak jackets immediately after. When things get tough, people go to what they're comfortable with, which is the product. And they hold tight to the product. You got to help the customer make headway. And you don't want to make headwinds. Getting people to work in that way. Holy shit, the unlock that we could possibly have. It still blows my mind how much decision-making occurs based on just gut feel in these commercial functions. Even if your data is in absolute disarray, it can tell you things.
By the way, fun fact, Matt, with you wearing your hat, when I first met Nick Toman, so I was doing my pre-call research, but it turns out there's another Nick Toman, and he's a huge Milwaukee Brewers fan. Because that's all the shit you see on Google. Yeah. So I get on and I'm like, Nick, man, I mean, you're a huge Brewers fan. I mean, that was pre-call research gone wrong.
Yeah, gone awry.
That was not Nick.
You were asking me.
You know, but honestly, Nick, that dude does look like you.
He totally looks like me. That's the problem. And people are like, so you have another career in the finance? You're like a wealth advisor? Like, what's going on? Nope.
Yeah, I mean, it's the weirdest thing because the other Craig Rosenberg definitely does not look like me. The other Nick Toman, for sure. And he's a huge Brewers fan.
From ABM to PLG, from Medic to MedPick, the world of business is constantly evolving. We'll cover the who, what, where, when, why, and most importantly, how you get the transaction. I'm Matt Amundson, and he's Craig Rosenberg. Let's get started.
All right, so here's the deal. One, this will be the third of the Three Musketeers of the Challenger sale. Nick, It wasn't in order. It just happened that way. Because remember when you and I were talking, I'm like, bro, if you were going to do it, I got to get Brent. And he could only do it yesterday. So we did talk to Brent. We had Dixon on before with the new.
Did he talk really fast?
Dude, he was on point. He's pretty locked in. I know you talked to him. That's probably more than me, but I was like, wow, man. I mean, me and Matt were like, dude, he is so locked in. And yes, he was fast. He told us the maggots on the plane story as well. Mm-hmm. So
we laughed.
I haven't heard about the maggots on the plane.
Wait, Nick doesn't even know about the maggots.
I don't know about the
wait
maggots
for the episode.
Yeah, you'll have to tune in.
I could just text him right now and find out.
No.
Not a good idea? Are there pictures?
There are.
There will be an audio-visual component to the show.
Ooh. Yeah.
It's amazing, dude. So look, everyone, so this is correct. Nick is the third of the Three Musketeers of the Challenger world, Challenger sale, Challenger customer. And it's Nick Toman who actually had to do not just write the book, but do a ton of actual execution of how we were going to get it out into the market. So like,
figure it out.
He was a little different than the other fellas. So, you know, I met Nick when he was at CEB and then worked with him when we were at Gartner. And now Nick spent the last 3 or 4 years building the SBI growth group at Sales Benchmark Index. And so he's a glutton for punishment, but he does amazing things. He's, you know, one thing, Matt, you know, I don't know if we'll get into this, but one of Nick's things is he always tries to get articles in Harvard Business Review. You do, dude. Like it's amazing. And it like that wasn't that the killer turning point on the Challenger? You told me this at one point.
It was the end of solution selling, and we wrote it and we had to put on flak jackets immediately after. It was hilarious.
Oh man, I remember that, dude. So by the way, everyone, I don't know if it's the name because we're so conversational. Nick Toman from SBI Growth is the guest on the show. Now let's go back to this. Dude, when you guys came out with Challenger, I remember all the old dudes. They were flipping out. And that article, so that was the impetus, was the article? Yeah. And your buddy, Dave Brock, who's our buddy too, we love him, but I remember him, man. He was like going to give you guys the business. And the cool thing is you guys talked and became good friends.
Yeah.
But like, I remember because we had a site called Focus at the time, and I had this sort of cadre of like sales experts, and like they were just like, oh my God, like they wanted to get you guys, and it was amazing.
That was fun because like Mike Boswell, who wrote Solution Selling, was like, what the hell? And we ended up taking him through everything, and he's like, this is actually really good. And I don't know if Dixon or Brent told you the story, but we went out to so Neil Rackham has literally a writing cottage in Leesburg, Virginia, which is not far from here. And it's as you would imagine. It looks like a gnome or a like a gnome would live there. Like it's just this quaint little writing cottage. You go in there and it smells like rich mahogany and there's like a fire crackling, and it was like and it was like 85 degrees, but he's got a fire crackling, and it's just as you would imagine it. And so we basically went like just sort of like made our offerings to him before we launched all this stuff, right? And it was before we wrote the HBR piece, and we were in the throes of writing the book, and we took him through everything, and he's like, I'll write the foreword to the book. And it was like, holy cow, like he's, like the godfather of solution selling is going to write and he was kind of like, it was viewed as like a handing of the torch, so it was this very sort of like symbolic moment. And we spent all day with him. He took us out to his favorite little like Vietnamese restaurant. And he's got a little Mini Cooper. So there's 4 of us like smashed in his Mini Cooper, driving through the streets of Leesburg, Virginia. And he's a really fast driver. And it was a wild day. There's so many stories from that day, but he blesses like the work. He's like, this is great. And then we come up with the HBR piece, the end of solution selling. And it was just like, he just threw an atom bomb back at us. Like it was unbelievable. I was like, oh man.
That is unbelievable. Well, first of all, if you guys haven't seen Neil Rackham, the environment that Nick just described is like perfect for how I've always viewed Neil Rackham. So that's like great.
No, he's great.
That's funny. Yeah. So but the HBR article, I'm trying to remember, you gave me the numbers at one point. It was extraordinary, right? Like
that one piece. Yeah, that one piece it's funny. At one point, and I didn't realize this, but our editor, he ended up leaving HBR before he left. He was like, hey, by the way, I got to let you guys know, 3 of your pieces are in the top 10 downloads of all time on HBR. Now, this was a few years ago. I'm sure something's knocked some of them off, but we had three pieces from those CEB days that it's in like, there's like a green HBR book on sales, and they're in there and all this stuff. So it was a really good avenue to get exposure to the work. And I'm forever grateful. They're just awesome people who work at HBR. And I spent the day up there in the offices and seeing them literally build the episode. Like they've got a wall they're putting together, each issue of the magazine. It's an awesome process. It's an awesome publication, and, help put us on the map for sure.
So Matt's a CMO. Should he work to get an article on HBR?
Absolutely, man. Why would you not?
Matt,
I think maybe something on AI. That seems to be a tasty.
Seems topic. To be if you put AI in a topic, anybody's going to publish it. It seems like right now.
Yeah, I know. We throw it around. We wear it on t-shirts. All right, so we got the big question, which will start the conversation. But before we do, Matt, I'm still using the Matt 2.1 feature enhancement of the transaction the lead-in to this, which is, Nick, you got to tell us a story. You just did. The Neil Rackham story was epic. But tell us, what's a funny or even a heroic go-to-market story? It could be something you guys are doing as you build SBI growth, or something you've seen from others. We're now leading with a story. It's worked great. And yes, Brent led with maggots on a plane. Mm-hmm. That's not a requirement, but can you tell us, our audience, like a great go-to-market story?
Yeah, insects and some kind of mode of transportation would be excellent.
Yeah. Well, the Neil Rackham one kind of won, but
the Neil Rackham one is a good
cottage
one,
is great.
And by the way, the funny part, and for those who don't track the career of Neil Rackham, is he ended up writing children's stories. So he has a pen name, which I won't divulge, but he doesn't write them as Neil Rackham. So he has written a ton of children's stories. Is sort of like he handed the baton to us and was like, I'm going to go write children's stories now, which is a really cool ending to the story. Oh man, where do I start with that, Craig? Like, you could have warned me you're going to give me a curveball.
We don't.
Like that.
Yeah, I definitely realize that. Well, I'll just, as you think about it, I do want to mention, you mentioned gnomes, and Sam is a big fan of gnomes.
Big
He
gnome
has
guy.
gnomes.
Yeah.
Oh, huge gnomes. He's in a club where they just talk about different gnome types. Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, I traveled to Sweden last year for a convention. It was pretty cool.
The gnomes convention. Tell us that story, Sam. All right.
Yeah, riveting. No, but it's you know what? Maybe going back, Craig, to the point of that first HBR piece, and it's funny because we wrote a bunch of them over the years that were just by design. They were like poke people in the eye. Like, we wrote a piece back in, I don't remember, 2008 maybe, and it was Matt, myself, Karen Freeman, who's working with Matt right now. She's super talented researcher and just a great person. But we wrote a piece called Stop Trying to Delight Your Customers. That was the first one.
Oh yeah.
And
that was a good one.
Yeah, that was funny. So everybody's like, you guys have no clue what you're talking about and blah, blah, blah. So, but the beauty of it is, like, the research was the research. It was like, well, do you want to argue with this based on your own personal point of view? And so there's a lot of counterintuitive things we found over the years, and, the end of insight selling and the death of the sales machine. So we tried to be really aggressive. So to the point of like putting on like the flak jackets, it was funny because we'd go through, and the way we sort of wrote the research was in sort of the challenger methodology, right? It's like, kind of lull them into the warmer, hit them hard with a reframe, explain the reframe, all this good stuff. And I'll never forget. So there's like this choreography to how we'd always teach the work. And it was like, take them on a journey, and it's like a roller coaster. And, I don't know what order people will listen to the podcast in, if the Brent episode will go before this, but like, you'll hear it, how Brent describes things for sure. And it's sort of like, do this big, bold reframe. And I'll never forget, there was one time, and sort of a mutual friend of ours, AJ Gandhi, who's at Marlin now as the chief growth officer. And I had worked with AJ for a couple of years. He was actually at CEB, so I got to know AJ pretty well. And then he was a client when he was at Ring Central, and I think mutual client of ours, Craig. I think he was working with Topo at the time too. But I will never forget this. We're in this huge room in California, introducing this to a ton of executives, right? It's like this point where like the high point hits, and you sort of like, and you've got it all wrong, and we're going to show you why. And AJ puts his hand up, and it's like the only hand at that moment. And for whatever reason, Brent Adamson stops. He's like, AJ, do you have a thought or comment, thinking he's going to like pile on and like really, reassert the point. AJ's like, I don't know, Brent, have you guys got anything on segmentation? And the whole room was just like, oh man. And I just remember I was like, dude, like segmentation, like at this moment it was like, here's all that's wrong with like, frontline sales behavior. And it was just like segmentation. It's like,
I love it.
Of course, it's a fix to everything, segmentation, which I actually do agree with him on. That is a fix to so many things.
Sure.
But, man, it was just a buzzkill moment. So maybe as AJ listens to this, he'll remember that, but it was hilarious.
Yeah, I love it. He'll enjoy it. He'll send us a note for sure. All right, cool. So that was great. Those are actually those were excellent stories, believe it or not.
We got a bonus story. Look at that. That's excellent.
Yeah, maybe we'll get a third one. I'll think of a third one somewhere. We'll slide it in. You won't even know it's happening, and it just happens.
So the big one, I did warn you about, which is the question that we launched the show on, is this idea of trying to understand what you think the market is doing wrong or approaching wrong today. That could be anything from, their strategy, tactics, approach, whatever that looks like to you. And it could be more than one.
Yeah.
And what are those things, and what should they do differently? So I'm going to hand the mic to you, and let's see what you got to say about that.
Yeah. So the theme of commercial efficiency has been everywhere lately, and rightfully so. And I'll just give a couple data points because that's what I do, Craig.
Oh, I know.
But if you look at the growth yield per dollar of sales and marketing spend, right? We go back to 2021. Companies were making, these companies in kind of the markets that I specialize in, which is, tech, business services, healthcare, some of those verticals. For every dollar of sales and marketing investment, they were making about 66 cents in terms of growth yield on those dollars invested, right? Go to 22, it's about 50 cents. Go to 23, it's about 37 cents. And then you go to 24, at least last we had pulled this data, it was about 31 cents. So commercial efficiency, kind of the yield on dollars spent in sales and marketing has gone down, 50 plus percent. And I think in many cases, you start to say, okay, well, why, right? What are the reasons and what's going on here? And I think in some cases, you're seeing things like actually to our friend AJ, segmentation is wrong, right? The coverage is wrong, the ICP is wrong, but to say that across sort of wholesale industries, it's a harder sell. And so you start probing as to why, like what's going on here. And I think a lot of it comes down to differences in customer buying behavior. And, Craig, this is something that I think you and I initially bonded on probably 10 years ago with some of the research we were doing back in the day on customer buying behavior. And it just continues to kind of proliferate. And I'm going to get to my sort of punchline here as to what I think people have gotten wrong around this. But on the path, I think it's sort of important to establish some of this, right? Where we've got 5 go-to-market representatives in the average deal, right? People that are working with the customer on the average deal. There's 5 of them. 70% of
That's
customer.
amazing data, by the way. I just want to stop. I'm glad you brought that one up because that was in there, Matt. I didn't want to. I didn't send any of the stuff you sent to Matt because I knew that's a data point we've never talked about. By the way, all the data points are on the other side about the stakeholders. What you're describing, the 5 go-to-market folks on it. I mean, that's incredible. That is a number I just never took in.
It's easy to understand. You're like, okay, well, we've got, whoever the primary quota carrier is, right? Whether it's an account manager, AE, whatever, it's kind of the primary. You've got some form of a specialist or overlay who's involved typically, particularly in technical sales. You've got some form of customer success person who's either going to inherit the account or currently has it, depending on kind of what stage they are in the life cycle. You got a sales manager who's involved, and then like throw in one more potpourri person, right? It's like
SDR.
Okay. Yeah, SDR, right? It's like, yeah, okay. And it's so interesting because we ask customers like, do you know who does what? Which is wild. We did the big survey and 70% of customers were like, I don't know who does what. Which totally makes sense at another level, right? So just how we go to market, not only is it more people, but you just look at the effect of what this is happening in terms of buying, where like they're not even sure who to talk to. And now, Craig, as we know, right, the average number of vendors that a given company is looking at when they're making a purchase is about 3. So if I got 5 people from one vendor times 3, like holy cow, it's just amazing as to what's happening there. But then you've got inside the company who's buying 12 decision makers on average, right? And what's really interesting is 6 of them are sort of like in the group, they're static, they're always there. But what our research showed us is another 6 come and go all the time. They're transient, which is really interesting. So not just the number is 12 on average, right? This is just on average. This includes small deals, big deals, like all of it, right? But that half of them come and go, which is totally disruptive to decision making when you think about it, right? Imagine when you're trying to run big projects and people come and go. And in terms of the organizations that they're part of, there's like 7 change events happening on average inside the average B2B customer organization, right? And this could be like new executives coming in, significant new products are launching, significant market headwinds they're trying to tame. So it's just like this layer of like change and internal complexity, and then our go-to-market complexity, and just mires everything down. So when we go back to this point on commercial efficiency, like, well, what's happening there? A lot of it is just in terms of like how things get bought nowadays. It is really difficult to navigate this entire web. So here's where the thing that people are getting wrong comes into play, Craig, is we still see so many companies going to market holding up their offering, the product, because their teams know their product super well. And guess what? When you look at it in the context of what I just told you about, right? customers trying to get things done inside their business. They're running significant initiatives. Your product is but a fraction of the initiative, right? They might buy your product to just help a little bit in terms of this broader initiative. And if you're not supporting that broader initiative, which we find very few go-to-market teams are doing, only about 25% of them, deals aren't going to happen. Yeah. And so that's kind of the big unlock for us is saying, okay, how can we take our whole go-to-market experience, right? SDRs, BDRs, CSMs, AEs, sales managers, whoever's involved in that pursuit, and get them aligned to supporting the customer initiative and not peddling the product. And that right now is just pervasive. And when things get tough, people go to what they're comfortable with, which is the product, the product, the product. And they hold tight to the product. And we're seeing it at levels I haven't seen it in my career.
Oh. Matt, your thoughts? Oh, you're giving him a kind of...
What?
No, you were agreeing with him.
Yeah, are you rating my...
you were also typing furiously. Yeah,
well, I'm typing. I like to type notes, actually, during these so that I can respond appropriately.
I think you should move the microphone closer to the keyboard. That'll help.
Oh, man. That's all right. We're just...
Now that we've called it out, I'm not going to edit it out.
Yeah, that would be weird.
That helps you, Sam. We're just trying to help you, buddy.
Yeah, it's Friday. So I've been seeing this a lot, right? And, it's something that as an operator, we spend a lot of time talking about, because when we're trying to work commissions and actually figure out, like, what are we really making on these deals? There's so many people who are involved now in the commissioning process, whether it's, what we've seen traditionally, like, BDR, obviously account executive, solutions consultant, or sales architect, but now there's just more and more people involved in this. And one of the things that is a real challenge is, one, you have to do it in order to get the deals across the line. But two, it's eating into the margins of every deal that you sell and forcing you to include bigger and bigger commissions. And then that starts to get into the question of, with the additional support that's going to our account executives, should we be reducing their commission size because there's more people involved in every deal than there ever has been before? So I don't know if there's been research that you've done around that, but like, to me, that stuff is, that's creating a lot of challenges. One, to keep people happy closing deals, but then happy when they close deals and actually get paid commission on it.
Yeah, no, I'm laughing because, the story I told a minute ago about AJ Gandhi, who was like, segmentation. Like, I feel like Matt just went like, it's like, here's this big thing. And he's like, can we talk about sales comp and crediting? But you're right. Like, and here's what's interesting is, and this is, there's work I've wanted to do for a really long time. And I just, honestly, here's the situation. It's hard to research compensation, because to find models that are so far out there that are addressing some of this is really hard. And to say, I want to study that, you just can't find outliers, because the market is so normed on these classic sales compensation structures. But you're right. You just get into this sort of advanced crediting, right? And overlay channel on top of that, right? And It's just like, oh my God. And it's like, whether a service delivery partner or whatever, and it's like, you run into all sorts of like crediting issues and so, there are certainly ways to parse that out and find the appropriate crediting structures, find the appropriate compensation structures. But, in my mind, some of the businesses that have just kind of thrown their hands up and said, screw it, and we're just going to move towards team-based selling structures and pod-based compensation structures, I think are figuring something out, and everybody is sharing in the upside and working together. But particularly where you get into business situations where you've got, different sort of technical solutions that can be layered into a given product, it's an expensive go-to-market model. I'll say that much. Where you've got a lot of people weighing in on it, and so you go back to some of the data we just kind of outlined. That's certainly part of it. But I think in some cases it's really warranted, and you need it. Other cases, you look at this from a job design standpoint, Matt, where you're like, do we really need all these people involved, right? Have we created too much specialization? And I see that a lot right now with particularly CSMs, where, I'll just say it. I think there's too many CSMs right now. And I think their job is too big. And, do I have a ton of research to support this one? No, but my hypotheses, I feel pretty strong in these. Like, I think, increasingly we've got to get to a job design where CSMs really are handling very clear signals from a customer that they are struggling to either adopt the product or a retention problem, and get out of this sort of ongoing servicing. And you've got account managers and CSMs now vying for expansion opportunities and renewal opportunities, and you're double comping them. And it's just like, what have we created here? And the job design is wrong inherently. So it's not actually the comp model. You just got people doing things they shouldn't be doing and sticking their toes into tasks that should be in other departments or other functions. Yeah. So there's lots of ways to skin that cat for sure. But I love that you were like, sales compensation. Let's go there.
Well, I mean, I think like when it comes down to it, like that ends up becoming the thing that motivates, people to do certain and various types of work. The other thing that, this team-based selling approach clouds is then if things aren't going well, where is the breakdown? Right?
Totally.
Is the breakdown on the account executive? Is it on the solutions consultant? Is it on the sales architect? Is it on the BDR who generated the lead in the first place? Right. I think it just makes it really, really hard to diagnose where do the problems lie. It's great when it's working, but when it's not working, it's really hard to then say like, sort of push in places and figure out where does it hurt.
No, and that's just from kind of the operating side of it, right? And just from a process standpoint, where's the breakdowns in that kind of a go-to-market model? And to your point, it could be a game of incentives. Typically, it's not incentives. I'll tell you that. Like typically, when you start to run through the analysis and you sort of determine where the break points are, it's more commonly in the process elements. But a lot of times, I'll tell you what we find is that you just got the wrong people in the wrong roles, and so. You kind of zooming back a little bit from that example of team-based selling and sort of like, how do you disentangle all that? Man, it's hard. You just think about growth at a company, like zooming way out for a moment. And growth is really hard. And to get the right balance of like the operating model and the go-to-market model, to your point, right? So like detailed operations and how people are being organized to do work. The growth strategy itself, like what are the markets we're going to pursue? Why are we pursuing those markets? Truly understanding kind of ICP and product market fit at the highest levels, right? Talent at the other kind of end of the spectrum is like, do we have the right talent profile and the right roles? And then the bottom part of this whole like pyramid here, or not pyramid, sort of diamond is how I think about it is, data and insights. And do we even have the right understanding, to your point, to go in and figure out where's the break? And if you don't have an understanding across all four of those spectrum points, right? The whole thing won't work. Like growth is a really complicated system. So I take your example and it's like, sure, but do you have the right people in the right roles?
Yeah.
Are we measuring the right things to determine where the breakpoints are? Do we have the right process in place? Are we even going after the right market? Are these people focused on the wrong customer segments and we're going at them with a giant hammer and we really need a little chisel, right? So
yeah,
a lot of ways to go after that.
Yeah.
By the way, as you guys were talking, this is a little different, but I did want to share. I had two things I want to lead the witness on, Nick. But like, as you were talking, there was a really great tweet, which by the way was attributed to one of my portfolio companies, Vantage and Ben Schachter. But it was talking about and that people aren't taking advantage of the commitments, right? The pre-buys, so to speak.
Yeah.
And it's I'll just read the quote. It says, by the way, not definitive, but it's interesting. One possible reason users are avoiding commitments could be the need to engage with account managers and negotiate non-public rates for minimum commitments. Using commitments could save you an estimated 20 to 50% on cost, right? But they are choosing not to. And what the theory here on this tweet is that it's because you have to talk to someone, an account manager, on that. And to me, that's not exactly what you were talking about, but it is this idea that like, not only do we have multiple people touching the customer, but we're not adding any value and not building that relationship where someone can't wait to call so-and-so and go, figure this out together collectively. By the way, I don't know that to be true.
Right.
I don't, you know what I mean? And it says a possible reason. So everyone, I'm sure, get a response on this. More importantly, it is an interesting that it's even brought up as an opinion is really interesting, and part of like this idea of like, not only are we creating this situation where we have like this created this really frictionful buying process. We're only talking about product, our first reaction, which is what you brought up as well. We're just not becoming like real partners in the process of that, in that use case. So,
well, look, I'll turn to kind of the research side of this, and then let's step back and sort of think about the application of this for a minute. And it's like, why don't people want to talk to account executives or account managers? Like, we know what the agenda typically is. And to your point, it's often product. From a research standpoint, Craig, we went through and we were trying to understand from the customer vantage point, right? What do sort of the most helpful and lucrative commercial relationships look like, right? The ones that really, they hold up as like, this is a great company. And not only do I say it's a great company, but I have spent a significant amount and much more than even was typically budgeted or planned or scoped with these types of vendors or suppliers. And when we step back from all the data, there was 3 behaviors that clearly stood out. So I'll just kind of read them here because I got a little tick sheet. One is advancing the customer's evolution in their business. So let's just unpack that for a minute. Going back to this point we made earlier, customers are running series of initiatives. They run projects, right? Think about what we all do within our own businesses, right? We are tasked to evolve businesses, right? That is why we exist as leaders inside companies. And so our customers are doing the same thing, right? They're not buying products. Buying products is not their job. We often think of it as well, that's their job, and the center of the universe is them buying my product. Like, no, it couldn't be further from the truth. They're getting things done and initiatives done. And it turns out the commercial people who support that initiative and help the customer's evolution are going to get welcomed in. So I look at a situation like that and it's like, okay, interesting. Second one is those who anticipate roadblocks for the customer. And this isn't like roadblocks to implement your product. This is roadblocks to navigate that 12 decision makers, right? Navigate all the internal coordination, navigate how am I going to get consensus and buy-in from other departments who may not be on board with doing this way, but God, we've got to do it this way, right? So that's the second one. In both those behaviors, they created over 130% more higher likelihood of the customer buying what we called kind of a bold purchase, right? A bigger, higher budget purchase. The last one I found in the research, this is really interesting, is the customer said the commercial team, back to those 5 commercial stakeholders, right? The commercial team is entirely aligned to my direction, right? And you think about what that means. That means the CSM gets it. They get what we're trying to do as a business. The AE gets it. They understand what we're trying to do as a business. The sales manager who pops in and out of the deal gets it. I feel that effect when I work with this vendor. They understand what I'm trying. They're not trying to sell me a product, and the CSM isn't just pushing for a renewal. They're trying to make sure we're getting to this target. This initiative is going to get completed successfully. And you just think about what that means from a go-to-market standpoint. Like getting a diverse set of go-to-market people orchestrated in that manner, and like, holy shit, the unlock that we could possibly have just getting people to work in that way. But I think it's at the core of that text or that tweet, Craig, which I love your ADD was taking you off to Twitter while we were talking, but it's a great point.
I'm going to lead the witness again. Matt, you'll love this one. I don't know if you saw this when you're preparing for the call with the real Nick Toman, not the Milwaukee Brewers fan. So I think you released today. I thought this was great if this will be released in Q1. That basically, and I'd love for you to talk about this, you guys did the research looking at financial performance of 600 companies, and that what we know, but now you've proven, is that the fast start is absolutely critical to your end of year fiscal performance, and that we typically weight everything for the end. And one of the things you bring up here is like, no, you got to win up front. And so I'd love, I know you've got other things we want to lead with the question, but then you launched this great research today, so I got to bring it up. But that's really interesting.
Well, and here's the fun part of this research is, every sales leader will tell you that's true, but it's like, show me. And this research isn't one that's meant to blow people's minds in that regard. Like, you got it all wrong. I think this is fun research in that it's like, look how important this really is. And it is hard to dig out of a slow start. It is really hard. And what was most interesting to us out of all the research, Craig, is the difference between those who started fast and sort of sustained it and those who kind of fell off or started slow and weren't able to find their way towards their numbers for the year. The difference was purely one of execution. And a lot of companies will tell you like, well, they've got more investment into commercial functions. They're more willing to plow more into sales and marketing. And it wasn't the case at all. This was purely a function of better execution. And it starts, God, I wish we could have had this message out 3 months ago even, because it starts with the planning process and applying those precious commercial resources to the right accounts. We're back to AJ with segmentation here, but that it does matter tremendously. But then from a sort of effectiveness standpoint, launching the year with, absolute focus on the basics of getting out in the market quickly. Don't wait on getting territories built. Don't wait on getting comp plans built. Like, any amount of delay matters. And then getting the teams out there and quickly building pipe matters so much, particularly if you've had some amount of territory shifting, which most companies will through the year-end process. So it's super important, Craig.
So it's a matter of preparing for Q1, or is there anything else that you would recommend to get off to that jump start?
No, I mean, from an execution standpoint, in fact, I would love to put in a little plug here, which is, we've got a nice research piece that outlines 10. Actually, no, we moved it down to 5. It was 10 steps. Now it's 5 steps to make sure you get out of the gates with a really great start. But the first is talent. Not enough energy goes into talent. We sort of kick the year off and say, okay, sales kickoff is the thing we do for talent. Like, everybody, yay, we had the rah-rah moment. Let's go get out in the field now. But like this just relentless focus on, do we have the right people in the right roles? Do we have the right people? Do we have the right people in the right roles? And continually asking yourselves that. It is remarkable to me, Craig, that so many leaders don't have a good mechanism or good gauge around, do I have the right people in the right roles, aside from asking sales managers. And, depending on what they see, they may or may not have that right or wrong. So, part of we spend a lot of time at SBI is answering that question. And are there moves you can quickly make to get that right start to a year? So we think talent's one of the biggest things to focus on right now. I would say data. Data is so important, and as we know, so incomplete. I am living in company CRM data every single day, and it astounds me, the state of the data. But just getting the data in order so that you can make sharper decisions through the year and quicker decisions with a proper fact base, it still blows my mind how much decision making occurs based on just gut feel in these commercial functions. And we have tremendous amounts of data. Even if your data is in absolute disarray, it can tell you things, and there are ways to dedupe it quickly, right? Get the data enriched, get data sets more complete. And that's a lot of what we're spending time with companies right now on is, getting that fact base together and getting the right reporting in place to make decisions quickly going into the first part of the year. And then the last piece of it, I would say, is around some of the technology, particularly some of AI capabilities, but some of the technology that can just quickly change the amount of sales efficiency and effectiveness for the frontline teams. I think certain use cases are taking hold, and we're seeing a lot of gains. And we can talk more about AI, Craig, if you want, but I think there's certain use cases that are awesome. There's other use cases that are really tough to make happen, particularly ones where you're asking sales reps to like, hey, go use the GPT. People are like, as for those guys, like, I don't need that. That's harder because you're not going to get a huge benefit from AI, but where it's occurring behind the scenes and driving focus without humans touching it, I think there's a lot of places we can gain a lot very quickly. Even if territories are launched, the comp plan's built, and you're like, geez, is there anything we can influence right now? I think there is a tremendous amount. So,
yeah, that's great. Couple observation on Matt on your typing tactics.
Yeah,
One is you're a very fast typer.
correct.
I'm impressed. I can hear it. Two is you do this thing, which is actually, it's really great it's actually really interesting. So you go, you do everything. When you do the space bar, it's incredible. It is a totally different tone. It's really cool. So you go, and you sort of pay us off with the space bar. It's amazing, actually. Sam, we got to pull out the typing and just do that. Cause did you notice that? Like it'll go,
Yeah.
and then it'll go boom, right? It was amazing.
We should all pause, and Matt, you just type a sentence, and
Matt types.
we can rate the thumb punch at the end of it.
Yeah.
Matt's like, I'm on vacation and these guys tell me I got to get on here, and we're teasing him the whole time. Yeah. No, hey Matt, that wasn't a tease. It was. Yeah.
Yeah,
But
it
it's
certainly
by your
was.
typings.
No.
It was. He can confirm that. He can confirm said. All right. So, sorry, I had to bring those two things up, but like, are there other things you feel like the market is thinking about wrong and they should think about differently?
Oh man, there's a number of places I could go with this. One of the things we did a bunch of work lately on going back to the talent theme, right? We did a huge study last year to understand the state of play around kind of commercial behaviors and how do different commercial roles sort of do what they do. And I say different commercial roles by design, Craig, because, to the point we made earlier, 5 roles that are facing off with the customer. It's not just sales. And you hear so much about studying sales roles. Well, we wanted to study all the commercial roles and try to understand what do they do commercially speaking, what behaviors do they have that either lead to success or not. And so interestingly enough, this was, we did a few pieces of research historically like this with the Challenger stuff. I haven't seen a really good study in a long time in this regard. And so we thought, why not do this and do it with a little broader aperture on different roles? The findings coming out of this were pretty interesting. So I don't know that this is people have got it wrong necessarily, but what I will tell you is we found 4 sort of archetypes of behavior. I'll just rifle through these real quick, right? We found one we called narrowing, and the narrowing behavior is what you think it would be, right? It's I am always I'm closing early, I'm closing often, I'm trying to get the customer not to think about other options or alternatives. If they ask questions, I try to just combat it, get them some tight information, and we just move on. I don't want any distraction happening in this pursuit, and the degree to which I can nudge the customer along, it will equate to commercial success, right? The second one, we called it provoking. And interestingly enough, Craig, this was one that involved leading with provocative, edgy insights and trying to redirect how the customer's thinking. And it showed up in that data. So if you don't think the Challenger is a real thing, it showed up again in the data. The third profile was one we called translating. And translating was really interesting. It was very sort of data oriented, but these commercial professionals, right? And I don't say sales by design here. These commercial professionals, they use data to help the customer understand impact, and the data is very sort of denominated in the customer's business. That's why we called them translating. So it was weird to see the data thing show up, but more importantly, they're really good about data in the customer's organization. So they can translate what the product means, right, to the customer's business really well. And then the last one we called anticipating. And anticipating was really interesting, going back to some of these buying themes we talked about at the beginning of the podcast. But they were all about, I'm going to help the customer think through this situation and think about what's around the corner. And they were very sort of future oriented, which was pretty interesting and pretty cool. So the question becomes which of those 4 tend to outperform? And so what I'll tell you is the first 2 have dramatically longer deal cycle times, dramatically longer, right? Narrowing, which ironically you'd think their cycle times are probably short, but they're probably winning smaller deals. No, they actually do win smaller deals, but their cycle times are much longer. The provoking one had very similar performance. And it's interesting because I think I believe there is a role for provoking. I believe it is oftentimes early in the commercial process. I think if you take today's buying dynamics of 12 people and you're constantly trying to reset, it slows things down. And you start to see that in the data. And then the latter two, I don't want to say profiles here, more like archetypes. The latter two are, they were the ones who had much shorter cycle times. So you're like, wow, the people who took all the time to like translate it into the customer's business, or, like walk the customer through what they have to do and how they should think about their business situation. That seems like it'd take forever, and man, it's hard. Turns out their cycle times were like 20 some odd % shorter, and their deal sizes were like 15, 20% larger. So you kind of take what we were talking about earlier from the customer's vantage point around like, help me figure this initiative out. I don't care about your product. And then you look at those kind of archetypes, two totally separate studies, but like the findings were really clear. Those who really do situate themselves in a path of helping the customer evolve their business and get things right do much better than those who are like, buy this thing, don't worry about that perspective, let's downsize it, let's discount it, drive. And when you're faced with the commercial efficiency challenge we've got right now, and everybody's kind of struggling to get to those numbers, guess what the sales leadership is promoting? Guess what the sales managers are pushing? It's a narrowing profile, and so that was super pervasive in the data. And I want to be careful too, Craig. So like, there's some times where it's needed, and we see in some businesses like PLG motions or more transaction motions do the narrowing thing totally. Like it works. But there's for most of the listeners on this, I would think are going to be in a position where it's totally counterproductive. Totally counterproductive.
What was the name of that archetype again? The winning one?
The winning two were the translating and the anticipating. Was what we call them.
Who was better, both of them, anticipating or translating? Were they roughly the same?
It's roughly the same. On balance, the anticipating is a little bit stronger, but the way I kind of think about this is really you should almost teach those or promote those in tandem, where it's like, listen, if I'm going to help you think through this, I better do it with like a really sort of customer empathetic sort of point of view. And put this in language and terms you're really going to understand. So I tend to think about those almost as sort of a synonymous like thing. They should go together.
Yeah, they would go together.
Yeah, I'm not surprised to hear that the translating and the anticipating has a higher deal size, but I am surprised to hear that it had a shorter sales cycle.
Yeah. And honestly, I was too. That's one where you kind of if you're placing bets, you're going to go, well, you know what? They get home on fewer big deals. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't necessarily true. That it was really interesting. I think the most surprising thing is that narrowing it was by far the longest cycle times, by far. And it's persisted. So we've looked at this we've run 20,000 various commercial roles through that analysis now. So a bunch of our clients use this, and those findings tend to hold true. Like I said, there's a few exceptions here and there, but those findings tend to hold true. And it is remarkable to look at those cycle times, deal sizes, and then you look at the quota attainment ultimately, and you're like, okay, I get it.
Is it possible that that's because it's such a pervasive and prevalent selling motion that like the buyers are just like, I'm just so turned off by this, versus the more customer-centric or empathetic selling motion where people are like, oh my God, like this guy's actually, or this gal's actually taking the time to learn about my business and, build a real use case, a business case here, not just, hey, we're going to solve this and we solve this for everybody, but really like going through the process of learning and understanding my business.
Yeah, I think you're onto it, Matt. And I think here's where I'd take it to a more extreme level, because this idea of being customer-centric, right? This isn't anything new or novel. But you look at it in practice and it's like, God, it's just so broken. Like, why is this so broken? Yeah. And this is where I go to that entire, the go-to-market approach, broadly speaking. It's not just sales. Like everybody's like looking out for number one.
Yeah.
And if you really want to get into it, Matt, like going back to your point on sales comp, that's probably what's driving a lot of this behavior. But here we are. Sure. So, but I think taking it to its extreme, like here's the way I almost challenge people to think about it is, would you walk away from business if you knew you weren't the right partner for a given customer? right? Like that's the kind of mindset you have to have. And that's you're like, well, how are you going to close any deals then? And it's like, how are you going to earn trust, right? Like that is the thing where you're like, listen, we're not the right partner, but here's what you really need to be thinking about. And actually, I think there's a better company in this particular situation, and I'm happy to make an introduction, but like, are you willing to go there? And like, that is a really high bar. And that is a thought that scares the hell out of a lot of people. But if you're doing the right thing at the right level, and what's interesting, by the way, we've done some of that research historically. What's interesting is, do you think the customer comes back around? Hell yeah. Or what more commonly happens is they're like, look, I know those other guys. You guys, even though you're not perfect, I think we can work with you guys, and I think we can make this. I want to work with you because you get what we're doing here and you understand it, and I trust you more. So I'm willing to give up on a few requirements because you're going to be a better partner for me, and I know you're going to see this through. Yeah.
There was a time when I worked at Marketo in like 2012-ish where we would talk to a prospect and they would realistically be too early for Marketo.
Yeah.
And we would say, hey, look, we don't think this makes financial sense for your business today. Your database is of this size. Your marketing process looks like X. Like, we recommend MailChimp, or we recommend Silverpop, or whatever we were recommending at the time. And I would say probably 9 times out of 10, the marketer saw that almost not like as an insult, but as like no, I can make the team. I can be good enough to be on your team. And it inspired them to want to sort of elevate what they were doing from a marketing
perspective. We're grown up, man. We're grown up.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I can ride this ride. I know I'm about a little short, but I can get on the ride. I'll be fine.
No, I mean, it's
cool.
It's powerful. Example. It's powerful.
Yeah, so that was perfect. With the buzzer coming soon, we're at the 3-minute warning. That was an amazing drop right there, Nick, on that data there on the archetypes. I did not like. I agree with Matt. Your first instincts are to gravitate towards number one or number two, right? In turn, like, the numbers don't, but like, basically it's this idea that you are going to do things that would seemingly prolong the sales cycle in order to shorten them.
Yeah.
And you will behave in a way that's like, really customer empathetic, regardless if you get the deal or not. It's funny because all you challenger guys are saying the same things. It's pretty cool because we had Matt and Brent on and they said the same thing. And it's just like,
it's irrefutable, man. You and this is what, I go back to, like, we're not making shit up here with research. Like, people are doing this and we're finding it in data. Like, people are doing this. And so you find it in how they describe their approach, how they describe their work, or asking customers, right? They describe the commercial relationships that they reward with great business. And, we're just channeling what is happening out there, and the degree to which you are just pounding on the sales process and just, violently moving business through it.
Yeah.
Like, I wish you luck. I do. But these buying conditions they're not going to face off well with that.
Boom. There we go. That is the information you need to effectuate transactions.
Whoa, effectuate.
Yes.
Wow. Great pull.
Yes.
Great pull.
Yes. I had an old sales leader. He loved the word effectuate transactions. It was just like, and we used to that's one of those where when you say it, you gotta, like, your face has to clench. You can't say it like, say effectuate transactions.
So hey, Craig, listen, I'll put a period on everything I just said, which is, we've been playing with, like, okay, how can we describe all this in like one little tight phrase? Cause that's another thing. It's just, you gotta have the bumper sticker, right? And so we've been talking about this as headway selling, right? You got to help the customer make headway, and you don't want to make headwinds. And so this headway selling it's like this little kernel of an idea, but a lot of our clients are liking where we're going with this, and we've been doing a lot of interesting kind of pilot work rolling this out with some of our clients. So more to come, but
let us know.
Yeah.
I would say speaking for Matt, he can jump in. I mean, we're in generally been really excited about those conversations we've had with your buddies, by the way. It feels right. And I think if we had to sum it all up, it is something the market needs to reconsider.
Yes.
Yeah.
And how they engage. And so that's perfect. Headway selling, put it on the list. And then when you continue to, optimize that, then we'll get you back on and go have that conversation. Okay.
All good, man. Love to come back.
All right. Awesome. All right. That was great. By the way, not a Brewers fan. Just
Not a Brewers
heads
fan.
up. Yeah.
Detroit Tigers, baby. Tigers.
Oddly enough, I am a Dodgers fan. Not sure if you realize that. And I am in Southern California right now, so I feel very comfortable wearing this.
Well played, Matt.
Yes. Actually, the way things are in San Francisco, when I was a kid, like you couldn't wear I was a Dodgers fan growing up. And then after just vicious beatdown from like adults and kids alike, I just gave them up. If you wore a Dodger hat in the Bay Area, it was ugly. But now nobody's from here. So like you go to a Giants game, it's what, 60% Dodger fans?
It might be.
Matt?
It might be. I mean, when I first moved to the Bay Area, like the Giants were winning a World Series basically every second year.
Yeah.
Right? And I'd be in a Dodgers hat at like Santana Row. You know what I mean? Like nice area, right? I'd be in a Dodgers hat and people be like, "What the fuck are you doing here, man?" And I'm like, I don't know, effectuating my wife's purse collection? I don't know.
That's right. Effectuating transactions at stores at Santana Row.
Yeah.
All right, cool. All right, fellas. Have a great holidays, Nick. Great to see you, buddy. We'll get you
Awesome
back
to
on.
meet you.
Same,
This
guys.
was a great
All right.
show. Thanks. Thanks for joining us for another episode of The Transaction. Craig and I really appreciate the fact that you've listened all the way to the end. What are you actually doing here? For show notes and other episodes, please visit us at thetransactionpod.com. Like and subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or any other place you get your podcast from. Either you have walked away from your podcast device, or this is playing somewhere in the background. Someone in your house would really like for you to shut this off now.